Now please open your PPT, ma'am.
Yeah.
Now make it.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. It is perfect and visible.
So our today's topic is protection of the transgender rights in the legal system. So before we move forward with the topic, let us know what is the definition of the transgender. So the definition of the transgender has been under the BNS, that is the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So the section 2 defines the transgender as a person, the individual whose gender identity differs from the sex which has been assigned to the person at the birth. So transgender is the person who is having a different gender identity which is different from the sex which is assigned at the birth. Now, this gender identity is integral to the personal autonomy, dignity, and the self-expression. So, the recognition and protection of these transgender rights have emerged as one of the most significant challenges in pursuit of the social justice and the equality in the 21st century. So this transgender person, historically, they are marginalized, they are excluded till date. They continue to face a widespread discrimination, a stigma, and a violence, both socially as well as institutionally. So despite this progress in our human rights law, in our constitutional jurisprudence, there is still a gap of the legal recognition and the reality means which is there in our society. Now, if we move forward to our PPT, we here can see the constitutional foundations of the equality, or we can say the constitutional promises which are made to make the term equality more impractical or more achievable. So let us start with Article 14, which speaks about equality before law. So the transgenders, though they are the new recognition after the NALSA case, but still they are part of our society. And like any other citizen or any other sex in the society, they enjoy the equality before law like any other people. They are also subjected not to be discriminated on the grounds of any sex. So Article 15 is a constitutional promise to the transgender. Article 19(1)(a) speaks about the freedom of the expression, that is, to express their gender orientation to the society. Article 21, which is one of the most important article in relevant to today's topic, that is Article 21, which speaks about that right to life, dignity, and self-determination. So Article 21 says to live a life with human dignity, but not a life of animal existence. Now, let us move to the next slide, that is, which speaks about the judicial recognition of the rights of the transgender. So it was only in the 21st century India began to legally acknowledge the rights of the transgender person. So it was the remarkable case of the NALSA versus Union of India 2014, which became a turning point because it declared the transgender person as a third gender and affirmed their fundamental rights like any other citizen. So this was also followed by the Transgender Acts, Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019, which we will discuss later on. Apart from this NALSA, we are having the other landmark judgments which went to protect the identity of the transgender in our society. So let us, after NALSA, let us speak about the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. So in this NALSA case, as we have seen that they have been considered as the third gender Okay, the code also emphasized the dignity, autonomy, and equality, and making the first comprehensive recognition of the transgender rights in India. The following case laws, which I have highlighted in my PPT, also is the echo of the judgment which has emphasized the dignity, autonomy, and equality for the transgender. So in the Justice case, Puttaswamy case, the judgment on the right to privacy reinforced the NALSA principles. They reaffirmed that the personal autonomy, identity, including the gender identity, they are the intrinsic part, they are intrinsic to the part of right to privacy under Article 21. Next, let us move to the next case law, that is the Navjit Singh Johar versus Union of India 2018. So in this case, it was the section 377 of the IPC. Then the Supreme Court upheld the dignity and the equality of the LGBTQ plus persons, indirectly strengthening their transgender rights. Then next, let us move forward to the next case law. That is the Arun Kumar versus Inspector General of Registration 2019. So the Madras High Court held that a marriage between a man and a transgender woman is valid under the Hindu Marriage Act, and expanding the interpretation of bride to include the transgender woman also. So definitely these judgments made a very remarkable journey for protecting the equality, dignity, and the social inclusion for the transgender. As a result of it, the Transgender Persons Act 2019 was enacted. So this act makes the India's first comprehensive legislative effort to recognize and protect the rights of the transgender individuals. And it was enacted in response to the Supreme Court's direction in the NALSA versus Union of India 2014 case. In this judgment, the government was called upon to ensure the equality, dignity, and the social inclusion for the transgender person. This act, that is the Act of the Transgender Act 2019, aims to prohibit discrimination, guarantee equal opportunities, and also to promote welfare measures across various sectors, including education, employment, healthcare, and housing. Now let us look into the key provisions of this act. So the key provision, first let us discuss about the section 3, which highlights the prohibition of the discrimination. So it makes unlawful to deny the transgender individuals equal treatment or participation in any activity on the ground of their gender identity. So this provision ensures the concept of equality in every sphere of our society, and again reinforcing our constitutional guarantee, which is there under Article 14 and Article 15 of our Constitution. Now, the another remarkable provision of this act, that is the Transgender Act, Transgender Protection Right Act, is that certification of identity. So this section 5 to 7 lays down that a formal process for transgender individual to obtain a certificate of identity has to be received from the district magistrate. So this certificate legally recognizes a person as a transgender and allows for the change in the gender details in the official document. So definitely it is one of the important feature of this particular act. Next, we move towards the welfare measures. So this provision directs the central and the state government, both the government responsibility to formulate the welfare schemes to promote education, vocational training, healthcare, as well as social security for the transgender person. So definitely it will emphasize on skill development. The government will take the initiatives for the rehabilitation, for the self-employment opportunities, and as well as acknowledging the community's need for the economic empowerment and social inclusion. So this is very important word, that is the social inclusion of the transgender. Next, we are moving forward to the another feature of this act, that is the National Council for the Transgender Person. So this act also establishes or for a National Council for the Transgender Person to monitor the implementation of the policies, the laws which are affecting the community. So the council includes the representative from the various ministries, transgender communities, as well as non-governmental organizations. So this body will be serving as an advisory body to the government on the policy matters, coordination, as well as to address the grievances of the transgender. But everything is not a very black and white for the transgender, though this act was enacted. There are a lot of implementation challenges which are there for this particular act. So there is despite this progressive judicial pronouncement and the enactment of the Transgender Persons, that is the Protection of Rights Act 2019, the practical realization for the protection of the transgender rights remains with lot of challenges, because there are many reasons for it. The existence of the legal framework alone is not sufficient. Only one act we are speaking about for the protection of the transgender rights. Okay, so legal framework alone is insufficient to guarantee justice or equality. If it is not accompanied by effective implementation, administrative sensitivity, and social transformation, then it doesn't gives you the success which the act aimed for it. Definitely there is a social stigma and discrimination. Okay, so this centuries of the marginalization and the exclusion have created a stereotype mindset in the mind of the people, which always contributes to the gender diversity. So these transgender individuals are often subjected to ridicule, harassment, violence, both in public and the private spaces. So sometimes they suffer from the homelessness, because people are not ready to provide any home or for the purpose of rent. Then they have a limited access to the education. This exclusion perpetuates a cycle of poverty. Many transgender, we have always seen that they are forced into begging or sex work for the survival. So this is one of the challenges which the transgender is having in our society. As well as there is administrative barriers also. So the certification process is that which we have to get from the district magistrate involves lot of bureaucratic scrutiny, as well as often it is invasive questioning also. Okay, so this progress contradicts this process of administrative barriers, what we have told about taking a certificate of your identity certificate from the district magistrate. It contradicts the principle of self-identification, which was upheld in the Nalsa judgment, which recognized gender identity as an intrinsic aspect of personal autonomy. Many transgender individuals, particularly those from the rural and the marginalized backgrounds, find it very difficult to navigate the process, because reason is illiteracy, lack of documentation, as well as the fear of discrimination by the local authorities. So medical proof is also required in addition to all these things for identifying you as a male or female after surgery, and definitely it violates their privacy and the bodily autonomy. So this administrative barriers discourages many transgender from seeking the legal recognition, thereby undermining the very purpose of the law. Next, we come with one of the problem of the implementation, that is a lack of awareness and the sensitization. So this word sensitization should come from the every key stakeholders of our society. Okay, so it is not only about the government, but it is also the mindset of the people, which should also be taken into the consideration for the inclusiveness of the transgender in our society, as well as making a real meaning of the rights which has been ensured under the Indian Constitution, as well as under the protection of the rights of the transgender. So many government officials are also responsible Many society section people are also responsible, which leads to the lack of awareness and the sensitization problem relating to the transgender. Another very important implementation problem, that is the economic exclusion, which we can tell about, that transgender people are, having very less employment opportunities. There is no concept of reservation for the transgender in our official places or in the private places. So despite of the constitutional guarantees of equality and non-discrimination, employment opportunities for the transgender people are extremely limited. Still, they are rejected to the job interviews. They are dismissed due to the prejudice once their identity becomes known. Okay, so lack of reservation, as I've already pointed out. So without any targeted policies ensuring access to education, skill development, formal employment, the transgender population remains trapped in cycles of poverty and vulnerability. So economic empowerment is therefore not merely an issue for the transgender, but a precondition for the dignity and the self-determination. Next, we can speak about the inadequate health access which they are not having. There are very few trained medical practitioners in our country who understand the specific needs of the transgender patients. Okay, so these are also one of the problem what is there in the implementation of the rights. Then there are also the procedures which are often prohibitively expensive, which are not covered under any government healthcare schemes or under any insurance plan. So this is also a gap in the implementation. If you talk about the data about the transgender, the 2011 census was the first to record a category of the others under gender, which was estimating around 4.9 lakhs odds the transgender persons, a figure which is widely considered inaccurate and grossly underreported. So this lack of comprehensive democratic data hampers the targeted policy design. It also hampers the budget allocation, implementation of the welfare programs. So many of these transgender individuals, they remain uncounted because they fear the disclosure, and they also face certain bureaucratic barriers in being officially recognized. So these are some of the implementation challenges what we have in our society. Now, let us come to the conclusion of the topic, that the recognition of the transgender marks are definitely a transformative steps towards realizing the India's constitutional vision of equality and the dignity for all. From the historical invisibility to the judicial acknowledgement and legislative action, these transgender persons have, come to a long and a challenging journey. Yet the struggle is far and not over also. The Nalsa judgment definitely remains a beacon of hope, emphasizing the self-identity, dignity, and the social inclusion. Okay, however, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 must have evolved or truly embody these principles, but this real protection of these transgender rights cannot be achieved only alone. As I told you earlier, that every active stakeholders of our society has a lot of contribution to protect the rights of the transgender. So we require a broad cultural shift, which we will not be giving a stigma, or we will also have the concept of the sensitization to the people belonging to the transgender community. We need an active governmental support for it, as well as we need a collective commitment to human rights. So as the NALSA judgment says about the third gender, so third gender is a gender in our society. So the inclusiveness needs in our society. They should not be subject to mockery. They should not be subjected to harassment. They should not be subjected to any stigma in our society. Then only we can have the constitutional promise to be fulfilled. That is the constitutional promise of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity for all its citizens. The word transgender includes the citizen of India. They are not a people from any other society or not from other any planet. They are very much in our society. Definitely, they have a different gender identity which differs from their sex assigned at the time of birth. But they have the liberty to express their sex. They have the right to, live with an human dignity, but not an animal existence. So this kind of the promises, that is the justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity under the constitutional, will only be achieved when we have a inclusiveness, sensitivity approach towards the transgender. Then some of the recommendations and the suggestions I want to include, that is the certification requirement. So when we talk about the certificate requirement, it ensures that the right to self-identification, definitely, but why we need a special requirement for this community or for this transgender, that they need a special identity certificate. They are inclusive in our society, and that should be there. So the amendment should be there in the 2019 Act, which will remove the certification requirement. Then we need to introduce more reservation policies in the education, in the public employment, to address the systematic inequality. Just a very simple example: when you travel in the public transport, you always see the reservation for the women, reservation for the physically challenged person, reservation from the senior citizen, but there is no any such reservation for the person belonging to the transgender community. This is just a daily example what we can cite, but if you think about the broader aspect of the reservation policy, it should be in the education, it should be in the public employment. We have to put our all effort to protect the right to the transgender, to protect their right, as well as to ensure that they are in the position to uphold their rights. Next, we also need to enhance the penalties for offenses which are done against the transgender persons, because if you compare to any other gender, the offenses and all that, they are compared to them, the transgender enjoys less, the offenses against the transgenders are less compared to the any other gender offenses. Then we need obviously the gender sensitization programs amongst our school, workplaces, and the government institutions. There are hardly any programs which are done relating to the gender sensitization programs. When we speak about gender sensitization, we only speak about the boy and the girl, but never we speak about the transgender. But across the school, across the workplace, as well as the government institution, this gender sensitization programs must be introduced more and more to make people aware, so that people are forwarded with the concept to include the gender, the transgender, in our society. Next, we should have welfare schemes relating to the healthcare, housing, and the skill development. As I already mentioned, that implementation program may that housing, okay, giving in rent to a transgender is still a challenge. It's still a struggle for a transgender. So even the healthcare, if we speak about, I pointed out that there are hardly few trained medical people who are, having a good knowledge about the body requirement or the body system, the demand for the transgender especially. So the welfare schemes which will be covering more and more health of the transgenders, which will be covering their housing, that is providing their shelter, and skill development, which will be helping in their concept of the employment also. Definitely, there should be a independent grievance redressal mechanism which needs to be there, which will be providing only redress to those transgenders who are suffering from their any of the issues relating to the society or relating to the administrative barriers. Okay, so If you have any questions to ask, you can. So again, just for 2-3 minutes, I'm going with my PPT. So here I have just given an introduction about the transgenders, that who are this transgender. I have also shown my concern about the transgenders, what they face, the widespread discrimination and exclusion in the education, employment, healthcare, as well as in the public life. We have also seen about the constitutional guarantees. In the next slide, we have seen it, that Article 14, which speaks about equality before law. Article 15 also speaks about the prohibition of the discrimination on the grounds of sex, as well as Article 19(1)(a) speaks about the freedom of the expression, that is the expression to express their gender orientation in the society, and as to enjoy a right to life with human dignity and the right of the self-determination. Keeping in mind of these constitutional promises, the Nalsa versus Union of India was a landmark judgment which recognized the transgender as a third gender. It also spoke about the self-identification of these transgenders. It also said very specifically that this transgender are a part of our society. They are included within the term citizen, and they are entitled to the fundamental rights which are guaranteed to the citizen in our country. So and this also directed the reservations in education and the employment. So the Supreme Court gave the directions to the governments, both at the central as well as the state, to implement the reservation in the education and the employment. So followed by the Nalsa judgment. So this were the another remarkable judgments which spoke about the transgenders, which try to take into the consideration that how the gender identity can be protected under the right to privacy. It also decriminalized Section 377 of the IPC. It also told that transgender women can be recognized as a bride under the Hindu Marriage Act. Then we also spoke about the Transgender Person Act, which is which was enacted following the Nalsa judgment. It definitely had the objective to prohibit the discrimination, and it is to be considered as one of the first comprehensive legislation for the transgender rights. It definitely ensures the equality, and it also promotes the welfare and the inclusion in our society. Then we also discussed about the key provisions of this act. So Section 3 prohibits the discrimination of this particular transgender in our society. It also speaks about certification of identity, that is an administrative process which has to be taken from the district magistrate of that particular district. Definitely it is a rigorous process, but still it gives a identification to the transgender in our society, and it helps in the change of the gender in the official record of that particular transgender community. It speaks also about the welfare measures which can be undertaken for the transgender, which includes the soft skill trainings for the transgenders. It also proposes for the National Council, for the establishment of the National Council for the transgender person. It is having the composition of the ministry from the people from the different ministries. It also has the representation from the people of the NGOs, from the different fields of the society, who will be helping the government in implementing as well as making the policies, welfare policies, better to say, for the transgender person. However, though we are having a comprehensive act for the transgender, but still there are certain implementation challenges which are still there in our society. Our topic is protection of the rights of the transgender in the legal framework. So definitely the legal framework is there, the constitution provisions are there, the act is there, but still there is a gap between the law and the reality. Okay, so how much the things are there documented in the legislature or on the official record, but there is a gap between the law and the reality. The first gap what we can tell about the social acceptance, that is the main gap what we are having, or lack of the people sensitization that we are having. We are also having the administrative hurdles. The things are not that easy. How we are speaking about the certification of identification. The certification of identification requires a medical test, okay, which to some extent is going against your self incrimination or your self determination. Then we also have the weak enforcement mechanism. Only we are having one council and all that, but we don't have that kind of the mechanism that if a person belonging to the transgender is subjected to any harassment, any social stigma, what are the remedies what we are going to have? Definitely there are healthcare challenges, as I told, that there are very few medical practitioners in our country who are having a very good knowledge about the specific need, body need, or physical need of that particular transgender people. Okay, absence of data is also a biggest challenge, because after 2011 only was the first year where we have started with the collection of the data of the transgender. Again, people are having that stigma that no, we should not come forward and reveal our gender. What people will say, what the society will think about us. Lack of education is one of the reason for it. Lack of awareness is also one of the reason for it. So this is all are the hurdles what we are having in, in implementation, or we can say not only the act but the true realization of the rights of the transgender, what we have promised for the transgender. So as I told you that this transgender person protection of rights act 2000 has to be, evolved truly to embody all these principles which can be achieved for the protection of the transgender people. And it requires a broader cultural shift from the people, active governmental support, as well as, collective commitment to the human rights. So India will definitely fulfill its constitutional promise, that is justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity for all its citizens, when we have a broader cultural shift, when we have an active governmental support, as well as we are collectively commitment to the human rights. Human rights law, the constitutional jurisprudence has come far to protect the rights of the people from every sphere, be it social, economical, or political. But where we are, lacking behind, that is the transgender. So let us all have the collective effort to protect the rights, as well as to recognize, then to protect the rights of the transgender. So I'm done with it. So if you have any question, you can ask me.
Participants, you can write down in chat box also if you have any doubts or query.